In Italy, there is a family almost no one outside the country knows, yet their influence runs deeper than the power of most governments. They are the people behind Ferrari, Jeep, Chrysler, Maserati, and even a major stake in The Economist. Their football club is worth more than $2 billion. At one point, they had influence over Italy's largest bank. Their companies account for nearly 30% of the Italian stock market and employ more than 360,000 people worldwide. And still, most people don't know their name. They're not just Italy's equivalent of the Rockefellers. Their reach is far bigger. Some say this family has held enough economic power to influence whether Italy grows or collapses. And the reason they've survived for more than a century is simple. They always sided with whoever seemed to be winning. Fascists, communists, allies, it never mattered. What mattered was the survival of their empire. In Italy, real power rarely changes hands. It gets passed down through bloodlines from old aristocratic palaces to corporate boardrooms. Families like the Benettons in infrastructure, the Pirellis in manufacturing, or the Berlusconis in media all hold influence. But none of them match the scale of the Agnelli family. They created and controlled the brands that shaped Italy's identity. And it all started with one company, Fiat, at the turn of the 20th century. Italy was still a scattered, struggling nation. The North was industrializing, the South remained poor, and the idea of a modern automotive industry felt unrealistic. That's when Giovanni Agnelli appeared, a former cavalry officer, with a sharp business sense and a willingness to gamble on the future. In 1899, he joined a small group of investors to launch a new venture, Fabbrica Italiana Automobili Torino. The first factory opened in 1900 with just 35 workers producing 24 cars in a year. Small numbers today, but back then, it was revolutionary. Italy barely had usable roads. There was no ready market. Giovanni wasn't entering an industry, he was creating one from nothing. Within a few years, Fiat's production multiplied. By 1906, the company was building thousands of cars, and Giovanni had already opened a dealership in New York long before most Italians had ever seen a car. He bought key patents, modernized production, and pushed Fiat ahead of European competitors. But success brought trouble. In 1908, a major financial scandal erupted. Fiat was accused of manipulating accounts and inflating stock prices. The entire board resigned. Giovanni was taken to court and accused of stock manipulation. There wasn't enough evidence to convict him, and he walked free, but the incident left a permanent mark. It changed him. He became more cautious, more strategic, and far more political. When World War I broke out, Giovanni moved quickly. Fiat's factories shifted almost overnight to military production. Trucks, aircraft engines, tractors, anything the army needed. The company grew to over 30,000 workers, and profits soared. But so did criticism. Fiat was accused of making money off the war. Giovanni understood he needed political protection, and that's when he made a controversial choice. He began supporting a rising nationalist named Benito Mussolini. Mussolini defended Fiat publicly and helped silence criticism. The relationship protected both sides. Mussolini needed money, and Giovanni needed safety. When World War II erupted, Fiat again became the heart of Italy's war industry. Tanks, trucks, engines, the factories worked non-stop, and when Italy aligned with Nazi Germany, Fiat followed orders. But as the war began to turn against Italy, Giovanni subtly shifted, showing sympathy toward the Allies to protect the company's long-term survival. Despite his maneuvering, the family's assets were seized temporarily after the war for their involvement with the fascist regime. But the punishment was brief. Italy couldn't afford to destroy Fiat, and Giovanni's connections helped him recover quickly. After the war, leadership moved to the next generation. Giovanni's grandson Giovanni Agnelli eventually took control and transformed the company into a global industrial empire. Giovanni made bold moves. In the middle of the Cold War, he partnered with the Soviet Union to build a gigantic car factory capable of producing 500,000 vehicles a year. To him, ideology was irrelevant if the deal made sense. Under his leadership, Fiat expanded to Russia, Brazil, Europe, and beyond. The company absorbed legendary brands like Ferrari, Alfa Romeo, Maserati, and Lancia. At its height, Fiat was so important that 1 out of every 5 manufacturing workers in Italy had a direct or indirect connection to it. Entire cities existed because of Fiat plants. But Giovanni wanted more. He aimed for Citroën, France's automotive crown jewel. Negotiations were progressing, and the Michelin family who owned Citroën was ready to agree. But then French President Charles de Gaulle personally blocked the deal, refusing to let a national icon fall under Italian control. That moment taught the Agnelli family an important lesson. Industrial power has limits. If the public narrative isn't on your side, politicians can stop you with a single decision. From then on, the family realized that controlling public opinion through media, influence, and narrative mattered just as much as controlling factories and money. Their influence didn't stop at factories, it eventually moved onto the front page. Giovanni Agnelli opened the first door to media power, and decades later, his grandson pushed it far beyond Italy. That grandson was John Elkann. Giovanni once owned La Stampa, his hometown newspaper. John followed the same path, but on an entirely different scale. The Agnelli story took a major turn when Exor, their holding company, bought a 43.7% stake in Getty, Italy's largest media group. The deal was worth over €100 million, and the shares came directly from Ray, the holding company of the De Benedetti family. For years, Carlo De Benedetti had been one of the most influential voices in Italy, an industrialist deeply tied to center-left politics. His newspapers helped shape public opinion across the country. By taking control of Getty, the Agnellis weren't just buying a business, they were quietly shifting control of Italy's national narrative from one political dynasty to another. GEDI's media portfolio was massive. With that acquisition, the Agnelli family now controlled La Repubblica, La Stampa, 13 regional newspapers, and national radio stations like Radio DJ. It gave them influence far beyond Rome or Milan. They could shape conversations in small towns, big cities, and across the entire country. But they didn't stop at Italian media. In 2015, Exor acquired a 43.4% stake in The Economist Group. That meant gaining influence over one of the most respected global weeklies, a publication read in government offices, hedge funds, boardrooms, and universities. The Economist has a unique kind of power. Its reporting shapes investor sentiment, influences policymakers, and frames the debates that guide markets. With this move, the Agnellis projected their voice far beyond Italy, positioning themselves inside the flow of global decision. Through these platforms, they gained the ability to influence which stories the public hears, which voices rise to the top, and which political narratives quietly become normal. Their model looked similar to Rupert Murdoch's empire in Britain and the Rothschild family's historical influence over financial media. The Agnellis found power not just in money but in perception. Yet even that wasn't enough. While shaping headlines, they were quietly moving into an even higher arena, the corridors of European power. Back in 1983, Alberto Agnelli helped co-found the European Round Table of Industrialists, an elite lobby that linked CEOs of major companies directly with EU policymakers. It was the first major signal that Fiat wasn't just trying to build cars, it was trying to shape the rules that governed Europe's entire market. 3 decades later, that ambition became official. In 2016, Exor shifted its legal and fiscal base to the Netherlands. Publicly, they said the move would simplify the corporate structure and reflect their global identity. Behind the scenes, it gave the family more freedom, fewer legal restrictions, more flexibility, and more control. Exor transformed from a powerful Italian company into a European holding giant with the ability to move capital wherever opportunity appeared, and it paid off. By 2024, Exor owned over 10% of Clarivate, a New York-listed data and analytics company whose information guides governments, universities, pharmaceutical firms, and major investors. That stake may rise to 17%, giving Exor even more influence over one of the world's key data providers. In today's world, data decides everything: market trends, policy shifts, research funding, and investment flows. By positioning themselves inside this ecosystem, the Agnellis gained access to insights long before they become public. They can anticipate where capital, innovation, and regulation are heading, and position their empire to profit first. Their investments reflect this strategy. By placing stakes in tech, healthcare, energy, and industrial firms, the Agnellis inserted themselves directly into Europe's most sensitive debates, from clean energy policy to information tracking and industrial strategy. This isn't the kind of influence you see on TV. It's the kind that shapes the world quietly. But true power isn't built only on industries or data. It's built on culture, on the things people love. The Agnellis understood this long before most. Their entry into cultural influence began in 1923, when Edoardo Agnelli became president of Juventus. Football united the country across class, region, and politics. Every trophy, every victory, strengthened the family's bond with the Italian public. Gianni, Umberto, and later Andrea all carried that connection forward. Juventus' success became intertwined with the Agnelli name. The team's triumphs on the field helped reinforce their authority off the field. Decades later, they targeted another cultural icon, Ferrari. Fiat bought 50% of Ferrari in 1969, gaining influence over a brand admired by both the working class and global elites. Fiat built the cars people drove. Ferrari built the dreams people chased. Over time, the family increased control, eventually owning 90% of Ferrari by 1988. When Ferrari finally went public, the world watched. The stock market listing wasn't seen as just a financial event, but a moment of cultural significance. Ferrari had become a symbol of precision, beauty, wealth, and excellence, and that aura reflected directly back onto the Agnelli family. Through a special arrangement with Piero Ferrari, Exor now controls nearly half of all voting rights at Ferrari. They don't need full ownership to maintain authority. It's built into the structure. And their reach didn't stop there. Juventus dominated Italian football for decades, and the family's industrial success often rose alongside the team's golden eras. Culture and industry reinforced each other. Victories in one arena strengthened influence in the other. John Elkann carried this legacy into the modern world. To the public he appears calm, quiet, and far removed from politics. But behind the scenes, very few major industrial decisions in Europe happen without touching his network. As the head of Exor, he oversees an empire worth over 40 billion euros, stretching from Milan to Amsterdam to New York. His real power lies not in wealth alone, but in being present where Europe's rules are written. Economic forums, elite business circles, roundtables, think tanks, foundations. These are the places where policy is discussed before the public ever hears about it. Elkann learned from families like the Wallenbergs in Sweden and the Pritzkers in the United States, dynasties that mastered the art of turning family wealth into generational influence. He studied their playbook and adapted it, embedding the Agnelli family deep inside Europe's political and economic architecture. Through these networks, they help shape EU policies on green energy, mobility, technology, and industrial growth. Their reach extends far beyond Italy and far beyond cars. The truth is, the Agnellis show what a century of vision, patience, and strategy can create. Their influence stretches from Turin to Brussels, from manufacturing to media, from sports to data, from headlines to policy. They have outlasted kings, dictators, political parties, and economic crises, all without ever needing a public office. And it raises a question worth asking. Is Europe truly shaped by democracy, or by dynasties that never disappeared? If you made it this far, drop a emoji in the comments so I know my History of Finance audience sticks around till the end. And check out the video I made on the Wallenberg family, it's the perfect follow-up. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.